Welcome to this Excel how-to tutorial on doing a lookup in Excel. Looking up both left to right, so looking up a value in one column and returning a value in the same row in a column further to the right. And then using the Vlookup function, and then also doing the lookup right to left. So looking up a value in one column and returning a value in the same row in a column to the left. And this will be done using the index and match functions. This Excel how-to tutorial is brought to you by using spreadsheetsmarter.com, the practical how-to videos and tips for Excel designed to give working professionals who use Excel a lot that extra edge in doing their day-to-day tasks. In this tutorial, we will look at the following areas. Each will have a skip button in the bottom right-hand corner if you want to move to the next one. Firstly, I'll do a guided walkthrough of the Vlookup function, looking at how the function works to do a lookup from left to right. I'll then do the same thing with the index and match functions. Firstly, using it to do exactly the same thing as the Vlookup, a lookup from left to right. And then we'll look at how to do it the other way around, so to do a lookup from right to left. Then you'll have the opportunity to try it out. Give you a brief data set and example to copy into Excel, and you have the opportunity to pause the video and give both the Vlookup and index match functions a try. Considerations. This is about what else we need to consider when using the functions. For example, what do we do if there is more than one occurrence of the lookup value in the range that we're looking at? Finally, it's important for me to get feedback on the video so I know what works for you and what doesn't, and also for you to take the opportunity to reflect on this. So the first thing we're going to look at here is the Vlookup function. So here we have some example data. We have salesperson as first name, product sold in column B, and the quantity sold in column C. And we want to do a Vlookup to determine how many products James sold. So we want to look up James in column A and return the corresponding value in column C. So we want to essentially return the value in C3 here, which we can see of 200. So the Vlookup function does exactly that. It looks up a value in the first column of a range and returns the value in the same row for a column further to the right. So in this case, we could look up a value in column A and return the corresponding value in the same row in column C. So the syntax of the function is Vlookup, open brackets, then we put in the lookup value, the table array, the col index num, and optionally the range lookup. We're going to go through each one of those and see what it is. So the lookup value is the value which we want to find in the first column of the table array that we're looking at. So in this case, we want to find the value James in column A. So our value for that is going to be James. And we put that in inverted commas because it's text and we want to treat it as a literal text. Next, we have a look at the table array, and this is the columns or the range which we want to look at, starting with the column where the lookup value is going to be. So in this case, we want to start with column A because that's where we're going to look up James in, and we're going to have our range at least including column C. It can go further in column B if we want, but we need to have column C in there because we need to have both the column which we're looking up the values in and the column where we're returning the values from. So in this case, our table array is going to be columns A to C. Then we've got the column index number, and this is an indication of how many columns away from the first column the column you want to return the values from is. So in this case, we're looking up the values in the first column, column A, and we need to indicate how many columns away from that column is the column to which we're returning the values, i.e. column C. So column C is 3 away from column A, so our number here is 3. Finally, we have a range lookup. So this is a true or false value that indicates whether we want to find an exact match. If we want to find an exact match, then we do false, or if we want to find a match within a range, then we'll do true. Now, in most cases, and certainly in this case, we want to find an exact match because we want to find James exactly in column A and return the corresponding value in column C. The only instance where we might want to do a true value in here, indicating that we don't want an exact match, is where we've got a range of criteria, say. So, for example, exam marks and corresponding grades. So anything between 20 and 30 would be an F, 30 to 40 an E, etc. Then even if we put a value of 35, it would then pick it up according to which thresholds we're working with. But in this case, we want to use false to indicate that we want an exact match. So now we've looked at each of those parts of the formula, we can put it all together. So our completed formula will be equals Vlookup, open bracket. Now lookup value, we're going to put James in inverted commas. So open speech marks, James, clear speech marks, comma. So each different part of this formula is separated by a comma. So then we put a comma, and then we've got table array. And this we said is the range in which we're looking in, starting as the first column with the one with our values. So that's going to be A to C. So if we put that, then comma. Our col index number, this was how many columns away, our column that we're returning values from is from the column that we're looking up values in. And there was 3, because C is 3 columns away from A. So here we put 3, and then comma, and then we put false, because we want to do an exact lookup. Close brackets, click enter, and it's given us a value of 200, which, as we can see, is the value in column C, with the corresponding value of James in column A. Now, if we just go through this and look at it for all of the salespeople in turn, we can have the formula, rather than hard coding the value James, we can now just refer to a cell. So we have all the values in a cell, and then on the cell to the right, we reference that. So for Andrew, we'll do this formula again, equals Vlookup, open bracket, and this time our lookup value, rather than hard coding the value of James, we will just refer to cell E27. So E27, and it will take Andrew there, and then we can drag down this formula for the other people. So E27 is our lookup value. Our table array is again A to C. Our column index number is again 3, and our range lookup is again false. Close brackets, and now that returns the value of 100, and as we drag down, we'll see that that extends to all the other formulas in the range. Okay, so now we're going to do exactly the same thing, and we have exactly the same data set, but we're going to use the match and index functions to determine how many products James sold. So again, we want to look up James in column A and return the corresponding value in column C for the same row. So in this case, row 3. Now, we'll start with the match function, and the match function takes an entire column, looks up a value in it, and gives you the row number in which that value occurs. So in this case, it could look up James in column A, and it should return 3, indicating that in column A, James is on row 3. Alternatively, you could also use match the other way to look across a row and return the column number in which it occurs. So if we did a match on row 1 for product sold, it would return 2, indicating that the text product sold occurs in the second column of the first row. So if we have a look at the syntax of it, it's actually very similar to the Vlookup. So we have match and then open bracket lookup value, which is the same as we had in the Vlookup, lookup array, and then match type. So lookup value is the value we want to find in the row or the column, in this case in column A. Which value do we want to find in column A? And this takes the same values we had before, James. And again, we put that in inverted commas. The lookup array is also very similar to the Vlookup table array, and it's the column or the row that we want to look up in. So in this case, we want to look in column A. So we want to look for James in column A. So our lookup value is James, and our lookup array is column A, so A to A. Then our match type is also similar to the Vlookup range lookup, but here we have 3 options, 0, -1, or 1. So 0 is like the Vlookup false. It indicates that we want an exact match. A 1 or -1 gives us the first value lower than what we're looking for, and a 1 gives us the first value greater than what we're looking for. In this case, we want to have an exact match, so our match type will be 0. And now if we come to completed formula, so we do equals, match, and then it shows us the syntax here. Lookup value is going to be James in inverted commas. Our lookup array is going to be column A, so we want to find James in column A. Our match type is going to be 0, indicating that we want to find an exact match. We close brackets and it returns 3. So this indicates that in column A, the text James occurs in the third row, hence the value of 3. We can now combine this with the index function. Now the index function is like a map grid. You have your, like a spreadsheet, when you have your columns along the top and your rows along the side, and then you say, right, I want to find a value in the second column and the third row. And if we did that on this sheet, it would give us the value in cell B3, which is DVD. So we say, right, we've got a spreadsheet, we want to go down 3 rows and across 2 columns. And so that's essentially what the index is. It's an array, row number, column number. So if we have a look at the syntax again and break this down, so it's index, open bracket, array. So this is the range you want to look across. So in this example I was just giving verbally, that would be the entire spreadsheet. Or in this case, we actually only really want to return a value in column C. So we only need for column C. We could have 1 column, that's our array here. So if we just put here as an array that we want to look across is in column C. Right now, which row number do we want to column C? Well, we want the row number where we found the match. So where we found James in column A, we want that row number. So in this case, row number 3. And which column number do we want? Well, because we did an array of only 1 column, this is always going to be 1. If we put anything else, it's going to give us an error. So our column number within the range that we want to index, so within column C, we want row number 3 and column number is going to be 1. And if we just do that index formula, so we do equals, index, open bracket, our array is going to be column C, so C to C. Our row number is going to be 3, which is what we determined from the match. And our column number is going to be 1, because we're only looking in one column. Close bracket, hit enter, and that gives us the value of 200, which is again the value in C3. Now, we'll take this one step further and just combine those two. Obviously, we could have them as separate functions, but we'll put them all into one formula. So we start with equals index, and it gives us our array, which again is going to be column C, so C to C. Then it asks for row number. Now here we want to put the match. So we do match, open bracket, and now we're into the match formula. So as part of the match formula, our first thing is our lookup value. So this is going to be James in inverted columns, comma, our range that we're looking across. So that's going to be column A, so A to A, and then our match type 0 because we want an exact match. Close bracket. This time, rather than hitting enter, we're now going to put a comma, indicating that we want to move to the next part of the index function. So the last element of the index function now is column number. We've already given the array, which is column C. We've given the row number, which is where we find the match in column A. And our column number is going to be 1, because within column C, we're already looking at one column. So put 1, close brackets, click enter, and this gives us the same value there as 200. So that is the way we've done lookup, again, left to right. So looking up in column A for a value and returning the corresponding value in column B. And again, if we do this for each salesperson in turn, then rather than hard coding James into the formula, we can reference a value in a cell. So in here, if we do equals index C to C, the column we're looking in, the row number of column C is going to be a match. So match, open bracket, and here we want to take E49, so Andrew in this case, but the value, whatever it is in E49, and we want to find that value in column A, so A to A, cover match type 0 because we want an exact match, close bracket, comma, column number is going to be, now we're back in the index function, column number is going to be column 1 because within column C we're only ever looking at one column. Close bracket, enter, and that gives us 100, indicating that Andrew sold 100. And then as we drag this down, we can see that that returns the values for each salesperson in turn. Okay, so now we're going to use the match and index functions to do a lookup the other way around, from right to left. So in this case, we want to find which salesperson sells laptops. So we want to look up laptop in column B and return the corresponding value in column A. Now, this works in an almost identical way to what we did just now in the previous example, but obviously the columns that we're looking at is all that's really changing. So if we have a look at the lookup value, so in this case, the lookup value is going to be laptop, and again in inverted commas because we're hard coding it this time. And our lookup array, which is the next element of the match function, is going to be the column or row that we want to look in. So that's going to be column B. So we want to look the laptop in column B. We then have the final element of our match function, which is match type. And again, we want to put 0 here, indicating that we want an exact match. We want to find the exact text lookup. And so now if we put this into the formula, we do equals match, open bracket, laptop, in inverted commas, comma, column B, so B to B, which is where we're looking up laptop, and comma, match type 0, indicating we want an exact match. And that returns 5, indicating that in column B, the occurrence of laptop is in row 5. So now onto the index function. So we have the syntax and the description as we had before. But here, now we're looking at column A. So actually, the first element of this is our array, which is what we're looking across. So here we say, actually, why don't we just look at column A? And so our array here is A to A. Our row number is exactly where we found the match for laptop in column B. So in this case, 5. And our column number is still always going to be 1 because our array is only 1 column wide. So our index function is going to be equals index, open bracket, A to A, which is what we're looking across, row number 5, column number 1. And replacing the 5 in there now with the match function, if we do equals index, A to A, our row number now is going to be a match function, so it's match, open bracket, laptop, in inverted commas, find laptop in column B to B, comma 0, because we want an exact match, close bracket, comma, next of the index function is which column number we want. So in column A, we only have 1 column width, so 1 column. 1, close bracket, enter, and again, that's returned Barry. So that's looked up laptop in column B and returned the colors of these values in column A, indicating that Barry sells laptops. And if we just put that into practice now for all of the products that we have, so in here, we want to say which salesperson sells CDs. So again, we're doing exactly the same function here, equals index, open brackets, A to A, which is what we want to look across, match, open bracket, this is all for our row number, and in here we put E49, so we're referring to the cell that we can then drag down. We want to find E49, so in this case CD, in column B, so B to B, comma, 0, because we want an exact match, close bracket, comma, the column number that we want in our range A to A is 1, close bracket, enter. Now that's given us Andrew, because Andrew is the corresponding value in column A, where CD occurs in column B. And we can drag that down, and that gives us our salespeople, which is coming from a column to the left. Okay, so now you have the opportunity to try this out. We're using exactly the same data set for this, so take a moment to maybe pause the video and just copy down the 6 rows of data that we have here from cells A1 to cell C6. Once you have done that, we want to have a look at the Vlookup function to find which product Richard sells. And you'll see here we've got the same text and descriptors that we had in the previous examples, but when you're trying this out, there's no need for you to copy all this out unless you feel it will help. Once we've done the Vlookup function to do that, we then want to look at using an index match function to do a right-left lookup to determine which product 300 units were sold of. So we need to look up 300 in column C and return the corresponding value in column B. So again, same data set, try it out using those values which we've looked at there. Once you've done this, resume the video, and you can skip to the answers as we go through it together by clicking on the skip button in the bottom right hand corner. Okay, so now we'll run through the answers to the exercises that you had the opportunity to try. So the first one was using the Vlookup function to find out which product Richard sells. So this was looking up Richard in column A and returning the corresponding value in column B. So our lookup value was going to be Richard in inverted commas. Our table array, which is what we want to look at, is going to be A to B. It could go further than that, but we only need up to column B. But we have to start, obviously, with column A. And our column index number is how many columns away from this column where we're looking up the values, the column where we're returning the values from is. And in this case, how far column B is from column A. And in this case, it's 2. We've then got a range lookup, which is a true or false, that indicates whether we want an exact match, in which case we put false, or a non-exact match, so to look within a range of thresholds, in which case we put true. And in this case, we wanted false. So the completed formula here is equals Vlookup, open bracket, Richard, in inverted commas, range A to B, comma, 2, comma, false. And so just compare your answers to what we have there. If you do have any differences, go back and maybe look at the beginning bit of the tutorial on Vlookup and see how to do that differently. So on the index match, we wanted to use the match and index functions to determine which product 300 units were sold of. So we wanted to look up 300 in column C and return the corresponding value in column B. So in the match function, the first element of that function is lookup value, which is the value we want to look up. And here we put in 300. We don't need to put this in inverted commas because actually it's a number, so it's not a literal text string. The next element of the function is the lookup array, so that would be column C. So we're looking at up in C to C, we're looking up 300 in C to C. And the next element was the match type, so 0, -1 or 1, and here we want to put 0 because we want an exact match. And the completed formula there is going to be equals match, open bracket, 300 in column C, 0, close bracket. And now the index function. So the index, our first element is the array, which is the range in which we want to look across. In this case, we want to look in column B, which is where we're essentially returning the values from. So our array is just column B, a single column wide. Our row number is going to be the match. So in this case, it returns 4, and the column number is going to be 1. So putting that all together, if we have in our combined index match formula, we have equals index, open bracket, B to B, which is where we're returning values from, the range that we're looking across. And then the row number in there is a match function, so the row where we find 300 in column C. So we do match, open bracket, 300, looking C to C, comma, 0, because we want an exact match, close bracket, then we come to the column number of our index function. So in the range B to B, where we're getting our value from, we've got row where we find 300 in column C, and our column number is going to be 1, because we only have one column wide. So put 1, close bracket, enter, and there you'll see again we've got returns again. So the product that sold 300 was the product game. Again, if you have any questions on that or you have different answers, then go back, have a look at the tutorial part on index match. And if you're still struggling with it, feel free to go onto the website using spreadsheetsmarter.com. Okay, so now we're just going to have a look at a few considerations. So things that we need to take into account when using either the Vlookup or the index match functions. So the first question we've got here, first consideration, is when should you use a Vlookup versus an index match? Now, the answer might seem for this video that you use a Vlookup when you're doing a left to right lookup, and you use an index match when you're doing a right to left. But actually, as we've seen, you could use an index match for left to right as well, and it's much better to use the index match rather than the Vlookup, because it's more flexible. And I'll demonstrate this very briefly. I'm going to run all of these considerations quite quickly, actually, because many of them are video tutorials in themselves. But it's useful here just to get a high-level overview of these concepts. So here you'll see we've got two examples. One is a Vlookup and one is an index match. Now, if I insert a column somewhere in this range, so from A to C, you'll see here, there. Now, what happens is my Vlookup now returns the wrong value. Whereas before it was returning me the quantity sold, it's now giving me the product sold, which is DVD. So my Vlookup is broken. This is because we hard-coded the fact that the column we were looking at or returning values from was 3 columns away from our first column where we were looking up values in. To get around that, we could use the match function within there, for example. So we could say Vlookup James in columns A to C, and then it will flex to A to D. And rather than putting in 3, we do a match for quantity sold on row 1 to 1, and 0 for an exact match. And that would then get around that. However, if we're using the match function, we might as well just combine it with an index rather than a Vlookup. And as we've seen there, even though we've inserted a column, it's made absolutely no difference to our index match function, which is the same. So the answer to this is when should you use a Vlookup versus an index match? Actually, always use an index match because it's less likely to break. It's more flexible, and it's also quicker to run. Okay, the next consideration is what happens when there is more than one occurrence of the lookup value in the range. And in this case, there are 2 occurrences of James in column A. Now, you'll see when we've done a Vlookup, it's given us DVD, and it's given us a value of 200 using the index match, which always corresponds to row 3. So even though there is an occurrence of James on row 7, it's always given us the value on row 3 because that's the first occurrence. And that's the case for both Vlookup and match. So we'll just type in there, both match and Vlookup will only return the first instance. The next question then might be, well, how can I tell if there is more than one occurrence of the lookup value? And the answer to this, so I'll just type this in, is to use the countif function. So countif looks in a range and determines how many instances of a particular value occur. So the syntax for this is equals countif, and then we've got range. So this is the range that we want to look in. So in here we want to look in column A, and then what do we want to look for? We want to look for James. So again, we put that in inverted commas, or we can refer to another cell. Close brackets, and it gives us 2, indicating that there are 2 occurrences of James in column A. So this now tells us that actually, if we use an index match, we we'd only ever return the first one. And that might be appropriate, or it might not. If we wanted to look at both, then actually we're missing a trick by just picking up the first value. So that brings us to last consideration on this, which is how can I deal with multiple occurrences? So where we do have, as we do here, two occurrences of James in column A, how do we differentiate them? How do we actually say, no, I don't want to look at just James, I want to look at the James who sells DVDs or the James who sells hard drives? And the answer to that is to make the row unique. So to actually take into account not just column A, but also, say, in this case, column B. And there's two ways of doing this. One is we could use something called a sum-if function. And this is be appropriate if what we're looking up, essentially, is a numeric value. Because then we could look up James and DVD and return the value in column C, or the sum of values in column C, where the value in column A is James and the value in column B is DVD. So that would be quite useful. And obviously, if there was more occurrences of James and DVDs, then it would give us a sum of all of those. So sum-ifs, and so this is in 2007, Excel 2007 onwards. Open bracket, we start with our sum range, which is going to be column C, because we want to sum all the values in column C, so criteria range 1, where in column A, so that's our first criteria range, and our criteria for that is James. So where we find James in column A, our criteria range 2 is going to be column B, and our criteria for that, say, is hard drive. So that's a formula that says sum all the amounts in column C, where the corresponding value in column A is James and the corresponding value in column B is hard drive. If we do that, we'll see that it gives us 600, which is now corresponding to James who sells hard drives rather than James who sells DVDs. The other way of doing this, which actually might be better if you're not using numeric, so if we're not looking at quantity sold, then we can actually do we could do a concatenation column, so we can combine columns. So if we go back up to the data set here, you'll see here that we've got salesperson, product sold, and quantity sold. But we want to look up in column C, where we've got a particular value in A and a particular value in B. So what we could do here is combine column A and B. So we could do this by using the ampersand. There is also a function to do this called concatenate, and that just combines text strings together. But it's the same thing as using the ampersand. So if we do in cell D2, if we do equals A2, ampersand, so that says take the value whatever is in cell A2 and combine that with whatever now we're going to say in cell B2. And what I'll do is I'll actually put in an underscore in between the two values so we can actually read it better. Otherwise it will just read Andrew CD as one word. So I'll do and I'll put an underscore in inverted commas, and I'll do another and then do B2. So now it says Andrew underscore B2. And as I drag down this formula, you'll see that then comes to James underscore DVD, Richard underscore game, and so on. And now we can then do a VLOOKUP, or actually in this case an index match, to say, well, let's do an index, open bracket, our array here is going to be what we want to look at, return values from, so in this case, column C. And now we want to do a match for the row number, and now we're looking up in our concatenation column. So we say lookup match James underscore hard drive in column D, match type 0, and then our column number already looking on column Y, column C, so our column number is 1, close bracket, and that also gives us the same result.